this idea of in the wild studies, kind of out of the lab. What's the kind of history of that? Where did they come from?
I think the history comes probably about 10 years ago when products started to be developed that weren't on the desktop, so mobile devices and public displays, where these were designed primarily for being in the home or in public spaces, or to be used when people are mobile. So it required a different way of thinking about how you test the usability. So testing it in the lab didn't necessarily answer the questions about how people were going to use it on the move or when they're in a public space. And so that's when people started thinking about doing user studies in the wild. And it sort of follows on from doing ethnography, which is looking at how people use their their work practices and how they use technology. And then the government funded an initiative for what was called an in the wild research, which was the engineering, physics, the EPSRC body. And so there are lots of projects looking at how new technologies would fit into the wild. As I said, ranging from mobile devices to devices used in hospitals. And that's, I think, the origin of the term. And since then, there's been a big move towards how you might develop techniques and methods for testing products in the wild. But it's early days.
What do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of taking this testing out of the lab?
Well, the strengths clearly are you see how people will use it in their everyday practices, and you see how they will appropriate it, or if they find it frustrating, what they do. Do they ask someone else? Do they just put it into the corner and not use it anymore? Do they, what do they do when it doesn't work? And so you get a sense of that how people really use it. The downside is that if you've designed all of these nice functions, you can't then go into a usability lab and set a specific task to see how people use it. So people may never use that wonderful function that was provided because you're not there to tell them or to ask them to see how it's used, and they may not be aware that there is this function. So I think there are pros, and essentially get a real sense of how they're using it, but disadvantage in that you can't actually be there in control to set some tasks for them.
Would you? I mean, some of the other
and it's more expensive.
Some of the other methods that have been discussed have been very much about I have this outcome. I want to know whether this works. Do you think that in the wild studies tend to sort of throw up more questions than they answer?
Absolutely. I think you can, it'll throw up things you were totally unaware of, and the way in which people will approach a technology may be very different from your expectations. So, and then you need to think, well, why did they do that? How might we encourage them to do this or that? So, definitely, that's seconds and made 3 errors, which I think is important for if you're designing apps and services. You need to know that. But then you need to know what they do in context. So, for example, if you designed a mobile app to help people shopping, and they've got 2 young kids that are screaming that they have to attend to, rather than looking at their mobile phone and seeing which is the best product, they don't have the time to do that. But if you took them in the lab, they could do that for you. So there are very different demands in the wild than in the lab.
So I suppose because it's likely to throw out more questions, it's not to be used. It's probably not an ideal tool for just testing at the end of the project. You want to be throwing it in and putting it through the project as it develops.
I think if you can, it's good to do a combination. So do some initial lab studies to see, test your proof of concept, and also how well people can perform on tasks. Yeah, and you can do there are techniques, quick and dirty heuristics, or where you can ask someone to who's an expert to walk through, or then you can kind of just give people the product to use in situ for a week or a few weeks, just to get a sense of how they understand it, how they learn to use it, and how frustrated they might be. Especially if it's a new product that's coming out to market, and you want people haven't really got an understanding of it, I think then it could be very valuable.
Yeah, I was listening to the founder of Instagram, who said that he built this thing in a weekend for his friends, and then he got feedback. So he'd already got a finished product, but he got feedback, and he said, "Oh, actually, people are only using this, so I'm just going to focus on," which I guess is that exactly. And he had the time to expand that and do that in a quite a natural way. But you can fold that into your project. I'm just aware of the time. I don't want to keep you for too long. Are there any lessons you've learned that would just increase the quality of the information you get back?
Right. In terms of an in the wild study, I'll just give you an example of one of our projects. We've been looking at tabletops, these multi-touch surfaces. For those who haven't seen one, imagine your iPhone being the size of your kitchen table and being able to interact with your family. They're quite expensive, and there's a lot of research and hype about how they might be used in collaborative and public settings. But we carried out a number of studies in the lab looking at how people collaborate and plan together and interact. Then when we placed one of these tabletops in the wild, we put it into a Cambridge Tourist Information Centre, and it was meant to be a family tool to get the family to plan together their day out. And it all worked lovely in the lab. When we put it there, what we found is that the family didn't come all together to the tabletop, but they would come in dribs and drabs. One would come and then another, and it had been designed to be used as a group tool. And so that made us rethink our whole idea of multi-user, because it found that complete strangers would start using it at the same time because they didn't realize, and so they would actually meet over the tabletop. And some of them actually went out together as a consequence. So one of the nice sides was a matchmaking tool in that sense.
That's a really interesting example, actually, a great example of you take this product out and it works in a totally different way to how you expected it to.
So the lesson learned there is if you're going out into the wild, you need to kind of be open-minded about what's going to happen, and not try and keep fixing it so that it matches what you want. It's like, this is how people, and I think that's, for us, that was one of the big lessons from doing that kind of in the wild studies. Whereas in the lab, you're much more in control, and you're able to get the data that you want to see whether something works effectively or not.
That's definitely a theme that's coming through quite strongly. On the one hand, as a project manager or as a developer, you've got to keep your resources in check and come to an end product. But actually, somewhere along the line, allowing room for things to evolve and grow naturally, and not enforce your own ideas of what a product should look like, is certainly a strong theme coming through these interviews. Can you think of any other methods or techniques that specifically complement in the wild studies?
I think prototyping, where you sketch and you draw and you use storyboards, I think that's very good early on. But also when you want to have the look and the feel of it. So I'm reminded of the guy, Jeff, forgotten his surname, who came up with the Palm Pilot. He used to carry around with him a block of wood that was sort of that shape, and have it in his pocket. And he wanted to know what it was like. This was before the weight of it, and be able to take it out and show it to people. And so there's a really cheap prototype, but it gave him lots of insights about what should be the form factor for this new product. So prototyping I think is key technique that you might want to use alongside in the wild studies.
That's a great example as well, thank you. So as a project manager, as a developer, I want to take my research out of the lab. Where do I start? Can I contact you? Do you work as a consultant? Any great resources? And
I think I would probably, again, it depends where you are, but I would go to one of these consultancies, and there are many. I would just put user experience, and then if I can suggest some, but I probably shouldn't. I sometimes do consultancy. I'm doing something for Which magazine at the moment, looking at some of their early learning products and evaluating them, particularly against the claims made by the companies.
Oh, wow.
So yes, depending on how busy I am, I'm happy to to help out, or if I can't, I can suggest someone else who will.